The Book of the Damned, by Charles Hoyfort, Chapter 18a. The New Dominant. I mean primarily, all that opposes exclusionism. That development or progress or evolution is attempt to positivize, and is a mechanism by which a positive existence is recruited. That what we call existence is a womb of infinitude, and is itself only incubatory. That eventually all attempts are broken down by the falsely excluded. Subjectively, the breaking down is aided by our own sense of false and narrow limitations. So the classic and academic artists wrought positivist paintings, and expressed the only ideal that I am conscious of, though we so often hear of ideals, instead of different manifestations, artistically, scientifically, theologically, politically, of the one ideal. They sought to satisfy, in its artistic aspect, cosmic craving for unity or completeness, sometimes called harmony, called beauty in some aspects. By disregard they sought completeness. But the light effects that they disregarded, and their narrow confinement to standardized subjects brought on the revolt of the Impressionists. So the Puritans tried to systematize, and they disregarded physical needs, or vices, or relaxations. They were invaded and overthrown when their narrowness became obvious and intolerable. All things strive for positiveness, for themselves, or for quasi-systems of which they are parts. Formality and the mathematic, the regular and the uniform are aspects of the positive state, but the positive is the universal, so all attempted positiveness that seems to satisfy in the aspects of formality and regularity, sooner or later disqualifies in the aspect of wideness or universalness. So there is revolt against the science of today, because the formulated utterances that were regarded as final truths in a past generation are now seen to be insufficiencies. Every pronouncement that has opposed our own acceptances has been found to be a composition like any academic painting, something that is arbitrarily cut off from relations with environment, or framed off from interfering and disturbing data, or outlined with disregards. Our own attempt has been to take in the included, but also to take in the excluded into wider expressions. We accept, however, that for every one of our expressions there are irreconcilables somewhere, that final utterance would include all things. However, of such is the gossip of angels. The final is unutterable in quasi-existence, where to think is to include but also to exclude, or be not final. If we admit that for every opinion we have expressed, there must somewhere be an irreconcilable, we are intermediatists and not positivists, not even higher positivists. Of course it may be that someday we shall systematize and dogmatize and refuse to think of anything that we may be accused of disregarding, and believe instead of merely accepting. Then, if we could have a wider system, which would acknowledge no irreconcilables, we'd be higher positivists. So long as we only accept, we are not higher positivists, but our feeling is that the new dominant, even though we have thought of it only as another enslavement, will be the nucleus for higher positivism, and that it will be the means of elevating into infinitude a new batch of fixed stars, until, as a recruiting instrument, it, too, will play out, and will give way to some new medium for generating absoluteness. It is our acceptance that all astronomers of today have lost their souls, or, rather, all chance of attaining entity, but that Copernicus and Kepler and Galileo and Newton, and, conceivably, Leverrier are now fixed stars. Someday I shall attempt to identify them. In all this, I think we're quite a Moses. We point out the promised land, but unless we be cured of our intermediatism, we'll never be reported in the monthly notices. Our self